My name is Ken Davidian, and welcome to the second season of Organization Theory in Space. In this season, I'm making one video for every chapter in the Oxford Handbook of Organizational Change and Innovation, second edition, edited by Marshall, Scott, Poole, and Andy Vandeven. This video covers chapter 25 of the handbook, entitled Interorganizational Network Change. In this video, I want to start out with a couple of important definitions. First of all, the term interorganizational networks describes a trans-organizational system of connections among organizations beyond simple dyadic relationships. Interorganizational networks can change in many ways, including the addition, subtraction, or mergers of organizations, shifting network boundaries, changes to network ties between organizations, and changes to organizations within the network. This chapter is organized around two key forms of networks and their trajectories. There are networks that are primarily goal-directed and others that are serendipitous. This difference affects the operational and structural dynamics of network change. This chapter, like the rest of the handbook, focuses on the process approaches to network change as opposed to variance approaches. Variance approaches explain very well what changes in networks, but explain not so well how and why those changes take place. This, of course, is the strength of process research. The chapter addresses four primary questions. First, how does the literature define change? Second, what theories are used to understand change in both types of networks and their member organizations? Third, what are the mechanisms by which change might be encouraged? And fourth, what are the commonly studied outcomes of network change? So, to date, a number of theoretical models of goal-directed networks have been developed, including the bona fide group collaboration theory, the diagnostic model of transorganizational systems, and theories of network governance, network orchestration, and change. The bona fide group collaboration theory describes the dynamics of network membership in terms of tasks, group dynamics, and environmental requirements. It recognizes that groups of organizations do most of the work in goal-directed networks. The second model, the diagnostic model of transorganizational systems, is an open systems model of interorganizational change containing design components of mission and vision, constituency, governance structure, measurement systems, negotiated order, information systems, and trust. The last set of models are the theories of network governance, network orchestration, and network change. Network orchestration is the recruiting of member organizations and direction of their action by a central triggering organization. Network governance makes sure member organizations act collectively and cooperatively, addressing conflict as needed and acquiring and using resources efficiently and effectively. Current research on goal-directed networks primarily employs the teleologic motor of change in two ways. The first approach focuses on changes brought about by organizational learning, where a major goal of network participation is to provide new sources of information for each member organization. The second approach focuses on changes due to some planned change or field-changing events, such as conferences or the implementation of new ways to integrate the network. Some goal-directed network research applies the life cycle motor of change, and this research focuses on stages of network maturation. The dialectical motor has also been employed in goal-directed network research, looking at how the network changes when reacting to opposing forces, such as between the network norms and changes due to environmental demands. As you can see, the evolutionary model of change is not included in the research of goal-directed networks. The open questions that exist in goal-directed network research includes questions about the role that shared identity and goal orientation might play in interorganizational network emergence and change. How can perceiving the network as a unitary entity as opposed to as a collection of unique member organizations affect the structure, dynamics, and other dimensions of these networks? Also, there are questions surrounding temporary versus enduring goal-directed networks. And finally, academic work should address network changes caused by its maturation and other planned changes. Moving next to serendipitous networks, prior research identified 5 factors driving the formation of strategic alliances between organizations. The list starts with 3 types of network embeddedness, describing how organizations within the network are connected to each other, implying how important it is to have network status and access to unique information. Ultimately, connectedness depends on the reliability, reputation, and resourcefulness of the member organizations. In relational embeddedness, organizations share many direct relationships. In structural embeddedness, organizations share many indirect relationships. And in positional embeddedness, organizations share similarly central positions in the network. The next factor is strategic interdependence, recognizing how organizations work collectively within the network to stabilize their positions in the face of common environmental challenges, scarcity of resources, and market uncertainty. The last factor is structural differentiation, identifying the correlation between how occupying different roles within the network increases the likelihood of alliance formation. There have been a number of developmental, multi-level, and duality theories of serendipitous networks. The developmental theories identify the first steps for how serendipitous networks transition from emergence to early growth. In these theories, emerging networks tend to emphasize identity, in which organizations connect to each other, seeking to enhance their own legitimacy by connecting to organizations of higher status. Subsequently, organizations change to more transactional or calculative partnering that emphasizes the availability of resources and what other organizations can offer. In multi-level theories of network change, change may come from many different directions because networks are highly interdependent and inherently multi-level. During stable periods, networks undergo relatively incremental change, which changes caused by a single organization does not impact the broader network. However, in periods of turbulence, which may be triggered by endogenous or exogenous events, network changes can be more rapid and expansive. Finally, the duality theories of serendipitous networks account for how member organizations simultaneously try to compete and collaborate with each other. These theories also account for how networks cope with activities of exploitation versus exploration occurring at the same time. Research into serendipitous networks includes all 4 change motors that are the subject of this handbook. The research using evolutionary approaches recognizes that organizations react to both other organizations and to environmental events. The teleologic motor research attributes more change to specific network agents, also that networks can be created, forged, or at least guided in certain directions. The teleologic research also asserts that specific styles of governance is used for specific results and outcomes. The life cycle approach tries to characterize the changes of the network as a whole rather than as a result of a single organization's actors. Finally, the dialectical perspective identifies the dualisms of networks, including the challenges of expanding the network, which is an example of exploration, versus reinforcing the network, which is exploitation. Open questions of serendipitous network research includes identifying what change motors or motors best model this type of network, and how the models can consider conflict between organizations. Next, the authors turn their attention to how changes in the network affect the individual member organizations, because after all, without member organizations, the network would not exist. The authors identify fewer than a dozen papers published in this area. Those taking the teleological perspective focus on organizational learning theory, for example, the exploration versus exploitation question. The evolutionary perspective depicts network emergence as a result of individual actions. Life cycle model research describes how individual organizations leverage their network to develop their own capabilities across life cycle phases. Finally, the dialectical model describes how network organizations balance competing demands like cooperation versus competition or building network ties intentionally versus serendipitously. Open questions that remain in serendipitous network research include the cost of network membership, what resources must be allocated or dedicated to network activities just to maintain membership, or how do network membership benefits compare with the opportunity costs. Ultimately, the bottom line is that there is currently no process theory of how organizations change due to network membership. Finally, in terms of further research in the field of interorganizational network change, the chapter identifies 4 possible areas. First, instead of adapting old models of interorganizational networks to include change, the authors recommend starting with theories of interorganizational change processes and expanding them to include networks. Also, another underdeveloped area of research involves investigating changes and the barriers to change, which, of course, is the question of inertia with respect to networks. A second area of research proposes proposed is the apparent positivity bias in network research. This bias, that networks are good, impedes the creation of a generalizable model of how and why networks change. A third area of research that can be improved points to the lack of quantitative research. Fourth, relatively few theories focus on the process of interorganizational network change. So again, process approaches to network change theory need to be encouraged. Finally, it would be most useful to construct a multi-level model of interorganizational network change, possibly applying different change models operating at different levels of analysis. The bottom line of all this is that we are still clearly early in the story of interorganizational network change research, and researchers have not yet developed clear theoretical models on the subject. Well, that's it for chapter 25. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you did, please consider hitting subscribe or the notification bell so you're alerted every time I come out with a new video, which is every Monday. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. OT in Space was produced by IRL, which stands for Impossible Research LLC. IRL conducts process research on the topics of innovation and industry emergence within the space sector context. IRL also offers services of organization theory consulting, research consulting, and STEAM outreach. This video is intended for educational purposes only.